Now, President Vladimir Putin of Russia may have declared a full-blown war against Ukraine, but the sentiment in Russia does not entirely reflect Putin's will. Thousands have been staging protests in the city of Moscow, the capital of Russia. According to reports, over 1,700 protesters have been detained or arrested across different cities of Russia. Thousands gathered near central Moscow, Akshita, to stage this anti-war protest, also in St. Petersburg especially.
Yes, and in most of these cases, when people gathered in large numbers to protest against the war, they were immediately detained, they were immediately taken into custody. But you see the kind of images that are emerging of thousands of people there out on the streets. They're referring to Putin in those posters as an assassin, condemning and urging him to stop the war. Loud chants echoing in the streets of Moscow, where Russians expressed strong condemnation of the Kremlin's decision to invade neighboring Ukraine. This isn't just limited to Russia, Shiv. Across the world, many such protests have now broken out, condemning Putin's decision.
Incredible. 1,700 people are detained in Russia, out of which 900 people have been arrested in Moscow alone, and over 300 people apparently in the second largest city of St. Petersburg, according to local reports. Anti-war sentiment has exploded, like you said, Akshita, in different parts of the world. London, Paris, Tokyo, of course, Moscow, Los Angeles, Berlin. We're seeing anti-war protests in all of these cities, Sydney as well. There's a possibility that there will be anti-war protests here in India as well. But we'll have to see how that plays out. The really compelling images of this anti-war impulse are being seen at Putin's doorstep in Moscow itself. Expect this anti-war sentiment to increase as the images of the devastation in Ukraine come in much more, greater and more frequently.
So as we beam these images for you, what's playing out in Russia, you see the kind of protests that have rocked the country. Putin now is facing a lot of pressure internally, as well as many civilians have condemned his step of going ahead and announcing a war. You can only imagine what it means for Russia as well, economically speaking, to go ahead and wage war against another country. It will mean, especially considering so many countries have gone ahead and imposed sanctions, will mean bad news and spell bad news for Russia as well. Let's focus also on what's happening as far as Indian nationals stranded in Ukraine are concerned. I'm sure a lot of you are asking those questions of when over 16,000 Indian nationals will be able to come back to India and what the government is doing to facilitate that. A fresh advisory has been issued to Indians from the Embassy of India in Budapest. Students have been asked to go to checkpoints on borders in an organized manner, and Shiv, there's been close coordination with embassies to ensure from neighboring countries they can be brought back.
Absolutely, because all the airspace is shut, the airports are shut. We've just shown you in these 10 images, we're showing you just 10 images of students stranded over there. Advisories have been issued, but things have escalated, Akshita, so rapidly over the last 36 hours that nobody's had a moment to actually decide what they want to do. On Thursday, Prime Minister Modi dialed the Russian President Putin, expressing personal concern over the safety of every Indian national, including everyone you see on your screen right now. He also conveyed India's priority for the safe exit of all nationals. President Putin listened to him. He said this would be ensured on the ground. India's embassies have been activated in Slovakia, in Romania, in Poland, as well as in Hungary. So via the land route, all of these students, including the ones you see on your screen, have been asked to organize themselves as quickly as possible, get to those checkposts, cross over where Indian embassy officials are waiting to facilitate them to the nearest city, the nearest airbase, from which there will be a flight to bring them safely back to India and to their anxious families and parents who are waiting for them.
So that's a communication, the latest that has been put out by the government, and Indian nationals have been advised to move to the borders. That is going to no doubt be a challenge as well, because public transport has been shut down, airspaces, as Shiv mentioned, are closed, trains are not flying right now either. So there is going to be a challenge on that front for several Indian nationals to make their way across. And there's no doubt that the government, Indian embassies there, will try to help as much as they can to any of these Indian nationals. Whatever they can do to support them, the government has said, we will do it. And it is on that front that we also saw that conversation happening between Prime Minister Modi and Russian President Putin.
And you can see large amount of people.
बच्चे से बात तो हो रही है डेली, अभी तक तो ठीक है, और हम ये चाह रहे हैं कि जल्दी तुरंत घर आ जाएं और इसमें जो है थोड़ा टिकट की व्यवस्था देखनी पड़ेगी। हमारी गवर्नमेंट से अपील है कि थोड़ा जो है इन टिकटों का दाम जो है सही कर दें, ताकि जो है हम पुअर कंडीशन वाले हैं हम लोग, कोई ऐसा तो है नहीं कि कोई सर्विस वाले अच्छे हो, हम जो है बेरोजगार आदमी हैं और हम चाहते हैं कि हमारा बच्चा जो है सुरक्षित ढंग से घर आ जाए।
We've also asked our embassies, our ambassadors in the countries neighboring Ukraine, and I mentioned these, Poland, Romania, Slovakia and Hungary, to send teams of their officers to the border areas with Ukraine to facilitate the exit of Indian nationals from Ukraine, to permit them to come into their countries, so where they can be safely evacuated back to India.
So I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, how has the world reacted to Russia's move of invading Ukraine? And we've discussed this in great detail as well, Shiv, about what the West, what NATO has done in response. It's essentially been sanctions and more sanctions, and it stopped at that.
It stopped at that, and I don't think the NATO and the West even knows what to do next. They hadn't anticipated that President Putin would go the distance as far as a full-scale invasion of this kind was. And so the shock and awe campaign has left the West and NATO as well shock and awe. Thousands have been taken to the streets to protest against Putin's decision, echoing their leaders and their condemnation. But that's all that's really happening. US President Joe Biden has slapped more sanctions, as you said, Akshita. The latest measures are expected to target Russian banks and exports of, technology critical to industry. Obviously, Russia has a backup plan to try and, sidestep many of the effects of these sanctions. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, too, has unveiled a package of severe sanctions targeting banks, members of Putin's closest circle, and the extremely wealthy who enjoy high-rolling London lifestyles. But let's not mistake sanctions, Akshita. Sanctions do have a very, very drastic impact on a country's economy. It's not like they're completely useless. But the people of Ukraine are wondering, this is about our survival. You're punishing that country, but you're not helping us survive. And that's what this is about.
Even in the conversation that you had, Shiv, with the Ukrainian MP, and many of them have been voicing exactly this sentiment, saying that, now is the time for the West to act, not just with sanctions, but to provide us military support. Because they're saying, realistically, when you say fight back, that's what it'll mean. We can actually fight back only if we get that kind of military support. That hasn't been offered by any country so far. You pointed out how the United States, what the UK has also done. Interestingly, United Kingdom has also banned a Russian airline called Aeroflot from operating. So they'll not be allowed to operate flights to or from the United Kingdom until further notice. The European Union has also followed the United States' footsteps. Initial sanctions aimed at 351 politicians, Russian politicians, who voted to recognize the two separatist regions in Ukraine, which happened 2 days ago. Germany has announced that it will block the sea gas pipeline project, which is designed essentially to double the flow of Russian gas direct to Germany. So that's not just going to harm Russia, it's also going to dent Germany. Let's play out some of the reactions from world leaders.
And Putin's aggression against Ukraine will end up costing Russia dearly, economically and strategically. We will make sure of that. Putin will be a pariah on the international stage. Any nation that countenances Russia's naked aggression against Ukraine will be stained by association. When the history of this era is written, Putin's choice to make a totally unjustifiable war on Ukraine will have left Russia weaker and the rest of the world stronger. Liberty, democracy, human dignity, these are the forces far more powerful than fear and oppression. They cannot be extinguished by tyrants like Putin and his armies.
So that was Joe Biden's tough talk. He's saying that, we will impose sanctions, condemning what Putin has done, referring to him as a tyrant and a bully, but that's where it stopped. We're going to continue getting you the latest updates from the ground. Things escalating very, very quickly in Ukraine currently. And here on India Today, we're getting you all the facts, all the latest updates from Ground Zero. Stay with us.